Hey everyone, welcome back to the Data Minute Podcast. My name is Peter Walker, Head of Insights here at Carta. Now today, I'm actually not joined by a guest, but we have two fantastic pieces of research that are coming out really soon that I wanted you to be aware of. So I thought it would be useful for me to go through the 4 or 5 key highlights from each of these reports and then let you dig into the rest yourself. The first report that we're going to talk about today is startup hiring. Now, obviously, this is a massive topic around a lot of different private companies for the simple reason that it seems to be going down. Ever since the peak of hiring in 2021, we've seen startup hiring across all of our Carta companies go down and down and down, month after month after month. Partly, this is due to lack of funding, which was a big deal in 2022, 2023, and early 24. And partly, it's probably a story about AI and how many startups are trying to go further with the same lean team that they started with instead of layering in new headcount. So we're going to go through 5 charts that sort of illustrate the state of startup hiring. Chart number 1, employee departures. So first, we're going to look at people who are actually leaving their jobs. You've got 2 different kinds of job leaving in this case. The first one, which is the black line on this chart, is voluntary departures. People leaving for a new gig at a new startup, maybe they're starting their own company, whatever it is. The second line, the sort of orange line on this chart, is firings or layoffs. So those are obviously not by choice, something the employee did not want to happen. As you can see, there's usually far more voluntary departures than there are layoffs. But that changed really radically in early 2020 during the pandemic when there were a big spike of startup layoffs there. Then we got into the 2021 period where voluntary departures shot up. It kind of felt like everyone was only staying at a job 9 to 12 months, and layoffs were at an all-time low. Fast forward to 2023, those two inversed, and you've got really high layoffs, and the number of people leaving by choice goes down and down. But in the last, call it 18 months to 2 years, we've seen the same trend across both of these lines. Voluntary departures are slightly declining, and layoffs are also slightly declining. In fact, they're almost kind of at a 1-to-1 ratio these days, which is odd. Usually, voluntary departures should be much higher than layoffs. And I think this points to 2 things. The first is that while layoffs are certainly not at peak, they haven't gone away nearly as much as we might have hoped. And the second point is that when the ratio between layoffs and voluntary departures is this close together, it's kind of difficult for each individual startup employee to feel really excited about jumping into a new gig. So they're more likely to just stay at their current job, noticing what the job market for their friends and fellow job candidates looks like. And when that happens, there's fewer need to backfill, which has major impacts for new hires, which is the chart we'll get to now. Chart number 2, we layer in hiring. So on this chart, you've got 4 different lines. You've got the black line for new hires by month. You've got that green line for voluntary departures, the orange again for layoffs, and then this dotted dash line that shows total departures, which is just if you add up layoffs and voluntary departures every single month. So the first thing to focus on is obviously the hiring. Hiring went bananas in 2021. There were nearly 70,000 people hired across Carta startups in a single month of January 2022. And since then, that hiring line has just gone down and down and down. So you've got something like 40,000 hired in January 23, 35,000 hired in January 2024, and 30,000, actually a little bit less than 30,000 in January of 2025. So each successive January sees fewer and fewer new hires across all startups. But of course, the departures are also a major factor here. So you see in some months, actually, the departures outweighed the new hires, which means that as an industry, startups got smaller on an employment basis. This is quite weird. In fact, it's really the first couple times this has happened to startups on Carta since we began the company in 2013. A couple points that I'll make on this hiring chart. I do expect that most recent months, the last, call it 2 to 3 months there in 2025, we'll see a little bit of pickup as late or laggard data comes into the database. And the second thing to note is that this hiring count is simply of full-time equity-holding employees. So it may be that startups are supplementing their workforce with more consulting, fractional, or offshore workers. We hear a lot about that, but I don't have good data to share with you on it today. Let's jump into the third chart where we see these 2 trends plotted against each other. Okay, chart number 3, which is net headcount. Basically, as an industry, are we gaining or losing employees? As you can see, again, we shoot up in 2021 and then we come right back down to earth in 2022, and we've been sort of trundling along since 2023. In fact, if you add up all of the net headcount changes so far in 2025 through the first half of the year, what you get is that the population of employees at Carta startups has grown by 6,000 employees since the beginning of the year. For reference, every single month of 2019, it grew by at least double that. So we are in a period of what seems to be a one in or one out system for many startups, in that the goal of those startups is not necessarily not to hire anyone, but to keep net headcount flat, meaning that every new hire is only available to the company when somebody leaves. Backfilling is okay. Adding new headcount is not okay. This is something that I hear from a lot of seed and Series A startups in particular, which is they are intensely focused on keeping their teams as small as possible in order to make the metric of the day, which is ARR per FTE, that is revenue per full-time employee, as high as possible when they go into those venture capital meetings. Okay, the fourth chart in this series. In chart number 4, we see all of these trends broken out by industry. So you've got medical devices, hardware startups, consumer startups. Each of them are building very different businesses, but their hiring practices seem weirdly to mirror each other very closely. So each one of these cells has a number. If the number is above 1, that means more people join than left. If the number is below 1, obviously the reverse is true. And you can see that there are some pretty high numbers again in 2021. Look at that fintech bubble in 2021. You see that for every employee who left a fintech startup in 2021, 4.2 joined in the first half of that year. That is massive company growth. Today, all of these industries are stuck between, say, 1.3 and 0.8 or so. Meaning they're really, again, not trying to change their headcount very much. That's why you'll never see hiring completely go away, but the change, the staticness of the industry seems to continually get more and more stuck. More people staying at their current roles, fewer people and fewer new talent flooding in to new roles. Okay, final chart from us. Here, we're just looking at who is actually getting hired. So, as usual in startups, the two main groups of hiring would be engineers and salespeople, and that is proven true no matter the age or industry that you're looking at. It's true in 2020, it's true in 2021, although with a slight dip in engineers, and you can really see that engineering talent is again at a premium here in late 2024. I think there's a lot of stories about startups replacing engineers first because AI is so good at coding. At least in our data, that doesn't seem to be true. Engineers still maintain a healthy share of new hires, and it's the other functions, HR, marketing, finance, etc., that seem to be suffering a little bit more in this AI age. Now, I'm going to leave you with this thought. It may be that this is simply a moment in time, and we're going to get back to big company building over the next 2 years as impressive startup funding rebounds. I gotta be honest though, I'm pretty certain that this focus on small teams is here to stay for a while. These companies have gotten radically more efficient, and it doesn't seem as though they feel the need to hire nearly as much as they used to. In a world in which you can get to hundreds of millions of dollars of ARR with a team of less than 100 people, many more startups are going to try to build through that path. Thanks for listening, y'all. I hope this was a useful deep dive into the state of startup hiring. If you're interested in more content around startups, the way they hire, and the way they compensate, we recently released our State of Startup Compensation Report for H1 2025. You can find that link in the show notes below. Stay tuned for more topic deep dives coming to you soon.